Mass shootings in America dominate the news again. This time we are digesting the May 14th Tops supermarket shooting in Buffalo, New York, which was followed by another elementary school shooting. This time it is the Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, just a week and a half later. When I say another elementary school shooting, it is because, as rare as you would think that a grown adult venting unbridled rage on elementary school children should be, it is, shockingly, relatively common. The first really high global profile instance being the Dunblane Primary School massacre in Dunblane, Scotland in 1996 on March 13th. March 13th is a date written 313. In English gematria, Robb Elementary School has a value of 313. The date of the Dunblane massacre, whose American equivalent was the historic Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre in Newtown, Connecticut on December 14th, 2012, an incident with which an attorney for the families of Sandy Hook linked directly to the Buffalo, New York Tops supermarket mass shooting. More on that connection later in this decode. On the exact same day, December 14th, 2012, that Sandy Hook Elementary was attacked, Chenpeng Village Primary School in China was attacked by Min Yongjun, who stabbed 23 children. What are the odds that such a seemingly rare happenstance would occur on the same exact day? As a result of the Dunblane massacre in Scotland, the right to bear arms has been almost but not entirely restricted in Britain. The Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting could potentially have an even greater impact. The First Amendment, freedom of speech, specifically dealing with challenging official narratives online, has also been greatly affected by Sandy Hook. The gun used by Adam Lanza in the Sandy Hook shooting was a Bushmaster XM15 semi-automatic rifle. At the time, Bushmaster was a model name. The brand name of the manufacturer was Remington Arms Company, which was auctioned off in 2020. And new companies exist as Remington and Remington Arms, which are not the original, now defunct company. This after accruing massive lawyers' fees from the case brought against them by the 9 families of Sandy Hook child victims and the family of one teacher. And there was an eventual $73 million out-of-court settlement. $73 million. In English gematria, Dunblane sums to 73. Sandy Hook, Connecticut is on the 73rd meridian west. They held Remington Arms liable for the actions of Adam Lanza despite a federal law, the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, that shields gun manufacturers from liability for actions taken by their customers. The Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, the PLCAA. Its long title is An Act to Prohibit Civil Liability Actions from Being Brought or Continued Against Manufacturers, Distributors, Dealers, or Importers of Firearms or Ammunition for damages, injunctive, or other relief resulting from the misuse of their products by others. Bushmaster is now a brand name. The exact same type of gun, Bushmaster XM15, was used in the May 14th, 2022 Tops supermarket shooting. There appeared to be federal protection of gun manufacturers. When it came time to exercising that law, it was not there to protect them. This is like the Internet 404 error page, when a link and a page seem to be there, but when you attempt to access it, it isn't there. Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. In English Gematria's simplest cipher, sums appropriately to 404. This is Rambo. These are the truth codes. History, fiction, the news, pop culture is written by an alphanumerical code called Gematria, best known for its manifestation in the Hebrew alphabet. Greek Gematria is isopsophy. Here I will use primarily but not exclusively the 4 base ciphers of English Gematria. A cipher gives a letter a corresponding numerical value. Different ciphers have different letter number correspondences. In the English ordinal, also known as simple cipher of English Gematria, the value of each letter of the alphabet corresponds with its order in the alphabet. A, the first letter, has a value of 1. B equals 2, through to Z, which equals 26. The value of a word, name, sentence, etc. is the sum total of the values of each letter that makes up that word, name, or sentence. So, in the simple or English ordinal cipher, Dunblane, the values of D plus U plus N plus B plus L plus A plus N plus E in the simple ordinal cipher sums to 73. The Sandy Hook Elementary School family settled for $73 million. The Pythagorean cipher, also known as full reduction, is the same as simple/ordinal, except that all values are single digits. A through I, 1 through 9, is the same as ordinal. J through Z, 10 through 26, is converted to single digits by adding each digit that makes up the double-digit number. 10 is 1 plus 0. Which equals 1. So J, the 10th letter, has a value of 1. Z has a value of 8, which is 2 plus 6, 26 reduced. Reverse simple/reverse ordinal and reverse Pythagorean/reverse full reduction are the same as simple and Pythagorean, except that they start with Z having a value of 1 and end with A equaling 26 or 8 reduced. A mass shooting in New York State was on the cards. It was practically inevitable, and the process to this top supermarket shooting started at Sandy Hook, as the lawyer for the Sandy Hook family stated himself. Let us look at the timeline and see why I say a mass shooting like this, the top supermarket massacre, was inevitable in New York State. December 14th, 2012. The Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in Newtown, Connecticut. 2 years later, families of 9 Sandy Hook child victims and of 1 teacher victim decided to sue gun manufacturer Remington for liability for their deaths, even though no gun manufacturer in the history of the United States had ever been held liable for the actions of its customers. And a federal law, the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, was in place to shield gun manufacturers, and there was a gun-friendly, seemingly, Republican-majority United States Supreme Court to enforce that protection. October 14th, 2016. Almost 2 years after that, the Sandy Hook family's lawsuit is dismissed by a Connecticut court, which cites the Federal Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act as being the basis for its decision. The Sandy Hook families then appeal that decision to the highest court in the state of Connecticut, the Connecticut Supreme Court. On March 14th, 2019, the Connecticut Supreme Court overturns the lower court's decision and rules that the Sandy Hook families can, after all, hold Remington liable, citing a loophole in the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. Remington Arms Corporation then appeals that decision to the United States Supreme Court. A Republican majority Supreme Court who would, no doubt, enforce the federal law shielding them from such liability. November 12th, 2019. The Republican majority John G. Roberts Supreme Court does not so much as give Remington a hearing. After receiving its affidavit, it rejects them outright, citing, as did the Connecticut Supreme Court, an alleged loophole in the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, sending Remington back to the Connecticut Supreme Court. Again, this was without a hearing, without a trial, just an outright rejection. New York State immediately chimes in on the case, with Attorney General Letitia James publicly praising the United States Supreme Court's decision, which is the first major sign of things to come in New York State. New York State expressing its excitement over the fact that the federal law would not protect gun manufacturers after all. July 6th, 2021, New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo signs Senate Bill S7196, allowing for gun manufacturers to be held liable for actions of their customers in New York State. New York became the first and only state to date at time of recording this video, which is the end of May 2022. New York State at this time is the only state to have such a law. Once New York State put that law on the books, what inevitably was going to happen next? It was a span of 313 days, 313, like March 13th, the date of the Dunblane shooting, which was a precursor to Sandy Hook, which led to Remington being sued, which led to New York State opening the doors to gun manufacturers being held liable for the actions of their customers. 313, like the gematria of Robb Elementary School, a Sandy Hook-like shooting that almost immediately followed the Tops supermarket shooting on May 14th, 2022, a span of 313 days after Andrew Cuomo will sign Senate Bill S7196 into law on July 6th, 2021. That's why it was inevitable, because the new strategy is to sue gun manufacturers out of existence and to make guns super expensive due to sky-high insurance premiums as a result of the liability law. So once the law is enacted, the powers magically get exactly what they want: a mass shooting to hold a gun manufacturer liable in a high-profile mass shooting in the state of New York. February 15th, 2022, Remington Arms settles out of court with the Sandy Hook families for $73 million. Again, in gematria, Dunblane sums to 73. Sandy Hook, Connecticut is on the 73rd meridian. This was after Remington had already filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection and had been auctioned off in September of 2020. So Bushmaster, now a brand name instead of a Remington model, is the gun that is used in the Buffalo Tops shooting. So Bushmaster in the crosshairs of New York State, flexing its new law. If Bushmaster is bankrupted, then I would imagine that it is off to the next gun manufacturer whose gun is used in the next event in New York State, unless another state institutes a similar law and has similar success in bankrupting a gun manufacturer. New York State is attempting to kill two birds with one stone by attempting to hold internet social media sites as well liable for the actions of the Tops shooter, Peyton S. Gendron. So the First and Second Amendments of the United States Constitution in the crosshairs of New York State, the Empire State. It is an important point to note that just because the United States Supreme Court refused to enforce the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act and sent the case back to the Connecticut Supreme Court does not mean that a ruling was automatically made in favor of the Sandy Hook parents. The $73 million paid by Remington to the plaintiffs was not ordered by the court. It was out of court settlement. Remington never took the case to trial, which they could have potentially prevailed in. The loophole in the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act is based on how Remington markets the Bushmaster, how they marketed it to Adam Lanza. Other industries like tobacco and alcohol have strict marketing guidelines that are unique to those industries. So the argument was that Adam Lanza acquired the guns as a result of Remington's marketing methods. But Adam Lanza did not buy the gun. His mother did. Therefore, Remington's marketing had no impact on Adam Lanza. There was a realistic chance that Remington could have prevailed in court had they pursued it, but they instead chose to fold and surrender without a fight. So who knows what kind of alliances, allegiances, and oaths they may have taken. That's Remington behind the scenes in their elite secret societies or elite circles. Remington Arms was founded by Eliphalet Remington, who was born in Connecticut, which is also the home of Skull and Bones secret society. Sandy Hook has been a lawsuit juggernaut. Writers and commentators like Alex Jones and Jim Fetzer have been sued by one Sandy Hook parent in particular, Lenny Posner, for portraying the event as a hoax. The Wisconsin judge who ruled against Jim Fetzer and his co-author Palachuk in a defamation lawsuit, which has a major impact on freedom of speech and the ability to challenge official narratives. That judge's name is Remington. Judge Frank Remington. If nothing else, that is, at least, ironic. Elementary schools as targets for violent rampages is inexplicable. A lone psychotic episode once in an extremely rare while might be plausible, but this is way too frequent. Amazingly, attacks on schools are not just an American phenomenon. I started off this piece mentioning that on the very day of Sandy Hook shooting, December 14th, 2012, there was a violent knife attack in Chengpeng Village Primary School in China. Albeit without guns, but this is quite commonplace in China. From Wikipedia, a series of uncoordinated mass stabbings, hammer attacks, and cleaver attacks in the People's Republic of China began in March 2010. These are attacks on schools. The spate of attacks left at least 90 dead and some 473 injured, as most cases had no known motive. Analysts have blamed mental health problems caused by rapid social change for the rise in these kinds of mass murder and murder-suicide incidents. Again, these are incidents specifically at schools in China. As the Chengpeng school attack was followed by the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in the United States hours later, comparisons were drawn between the two. So now the fear of a potential attack is gripping elementary schools and schools in general around the United States and most likely in China as well. The psychological principle applied here is celebrated in one of the most famous quotes of Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuit order, who made the quote famous after it was originally made by Aristotle. Quote, "Give me a child till he's 7 and I will show you the man." Adolf Hitler expressed it in his words, quote, "He alone who owns the youth gains the future." Give me a child till he's 7 refers to embedding into the deepest recesses of the unconscious mind of a child in the first 7 years of its life, specific perceptions and ideas which will determine the behaviors and thoughts of the person for the rest of their life through adulthood, regardless of what they learn in the years after that. The first 7 years is when the unconscious mind is most programmable. This is why the grandmother of all rituals, one of the greatest watershed moments in human history, the September 11th World Trade Center and Pentagon destructions, featured front and center visually the elementary school. where the President of the United States was at the time of the attacks and from whence he delivered his speech to the world after the event. This was Emma E. Booker Elementary School in Sarasota, Florida, imprinted on the unconscious minds and associated with the emotions of the day. George W. Bush, the historic attack, the elementary school. George W. Bush, who was born in Connecticut. So back to Connecticut, and again, the elementary school. It was George W. Bush who signed the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, a law that has since been effectively neutered by the Sandy Hook juggernaut that opened the door for New York State to be able to sue gun manufacturers and sellers under a law passed on July 6th, 2021. July 6th being the birthday of George W. Bush. New York State Bill S-7196 was signed into law by Governor Andrew Cuomo, whose birthday is 12/6, December 6th, ironically matching the gematria of Bushmaster. The location of Top Supermarket, Jefferson Avenue, abbreviated 126. 126 is also 12th June, the birthday of George H.W. Bush. So this is the context, backdrop, and timeline of the Tops shooting. More on it later, and the Bush connections and the 612, 12-6 number. Think of O.J. Simpson, how he's associated with the city of Buffalo and how he was involved in a racially divisive event, just as the Buffalo shooting is said to be a racially motivated event. And O.J. Simpson's famous event happened on this date, 6/12, June 12th. Dunblane Massacre, sums to 6/12, and the Agrippa Latin cipher. So more on this in future videos. Thank you for watching. Please like, please subscribe, and share. And take care of yourselves.